I almost just fell over.
Did you? Because
No,
it's so
I
slow.
just fell. We're back with the Granddad podcast. This will be the last one before Granddad goes back to Florida.
Yeah, it's been an out-of-mind experience to come up here and just become part of the Dale.
That's right.
Right? And it's like you're in this mystical, enchanted place that's got its own air and its own vibe, and the rest of the world falls away.
So the one thing we'll have to get set up on is Riverside, which is the podcasting platform that my husband uses for his work stuff. And basically we log in, we record, it's 4K.
Yeah. And you see a lot of podcasts do that, right? Most of the time when you see those two people on a split screen, it's that.
Yeah. It was a little drizzly outside, so we figured let's just pick a room in the farmhouse. And this is what will eventually become the master bedroom. And the master bedroom is really unique because it is built on the whole house is built on a slope, but this one's particularly built on a slope because it's built on the original cabin from 1878, the roof. And so when Mark and I and the twins first moved in after Hurricane Helene, there was already mattresses here, and we just put the mattresses sort of this way and slept in this room.
Yeah.
I would wake up at the bottom of the bed every single morning.
Because, no, flat beds matter, as any camper will tell you.
Yeah. And Mark was fine. I think he's bigger, so
Yeah.
he was the ratio of gravity going this
Yeah,
way.
he could just even out all the bumps.
He could just I would just slip right down. My feet would be dangling off the end. So we eventually set up in one of the other bedrooms.
Yes.
And I'm not really sure at what point we'll start working on this master.
Well, you got to have someone to come do it, and everything's mountain time.
Originally, we were supposed to get our guy in mid-September. And then because it's mountain time, it's like things are getting pushed out. And then because of the hurricane, things really got pushed out. So he's been working on restoration for the past month and a half.
Sure has.
And he's now finishing up some of the other projects that he was working on. So at some point here,
Yeah, and understand when we say reno, it doesn't mean, oh, good, we're going to get the new wall we thought. No, we're going to look under the floorboards and see what creatures live there.
Mark got impatient the other day and he broke into the ceiling downstairs and just rotted wood kind of came out. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of time and effort and money spent.
Drama was the word I was looking for.
A lot of drama spent making sure the house is safe before we do anything else.
Yes, when we came into this room to do this podcast, our last piece of advice from our engineer was, well, don't do too much jumping around. It should be okay.
And the engineer is my husband, by the way. After poking that hole, we literally told the girls they cannot come in this room. So we're in here, but
yeah,
we're like on this side.
We don't know what it's being held up by.
No, that window across from us, we don't know what it's being held up by. Down below us is the dining room, and we've actually sectioned off part of the dining room saying no one's allowed back there.
Probably we just don't know that it's safe.
Yeah, so we're going to find out. Granddad, you're doing the drive from here to Florida.
Marco Island.
On your own.
On my own.
This will be the first time doing that commute by yourself.
Yeah, somehow the children are convinced that I'm not conceivably safe. Somehow, having raised all of them and run my practice and had all the travels all over the world, somehow I'm not competent to drive 12 hours. It's just hilarious how concerned everyone is.
It's not even a concern. It's just like, I wouldn't want to do it. Let's put it that way.
It's 12 hours.
It's 12 hours.
It's on roads so flat that my major concern is falling asleep.
That's true. It's once you get out of the mountains, which would take you, what, an hour?
An hour.
Then it's
interstate. When you get to Florida, they are the flattest roads God ever put on this earth. It is agony.
Yeah. I've done that highway by myself for 3 hours.
Yes.
And that was like, holy smokers.
Man, 3 hours and 3 hours to go and I'm bored.
Yeah. Have you mapped out yet where you're staying tomorrow?
I'm going to try to avoid Atlanta. Atlanta is just the worst. So I think I'm going to add a little time and kind of cut down through Georgia. Yeah. I'm going to keep west.
Nice.
And go slower. And there's some insanely gorgeous roads in northern Georgia and Alabama, and I'm going to do that.
Nice. We're maybe looking at coming to visit in February. I have yet to decide whether I'm going. And here's my big debate.
Yeah.
So we realized the girls really need to learn how to swim. We're bringing them to lessons here at the Y, but it's just not the same thing as spending a full week in a warm pool. Mark's for sure going, but I have these like lovely animals that I just don't want to leave. Could line people up for animal care, all that's fine, but I feel this commitment here. And then also big FOMO.
Oh, the worst FOMO in the world.
Yeah, I'm like, well, you guys, sounds like you guys be having a lot of fun.
Well, because remember, we moved to this place because my wife Holly, your mother-in-law, had this dreadful Parkinson's disease. And so we realized if people were going to come and visit us cheerfully, it should be fun. So it's very much a resort.
And Florida is really fun.
As a holiday, it's the best.
But the further I get down the Pretty Sweet Acres rabbit hole, and the rescues and the
valley,
and we might have baby goats born and all this kind of stuff, the more I'm like, I can't imagine missing any of this. I may have to just send
Well, yeah, and we'll send you really cloyingly cheap, inappropriate, we're really having fun here in Florida without you.
Right?
Yeah, it'll be great. We'll work hard at it.
There's really no bad choices.
No.
We're very lucky.
Oh, and so for me, the swimming's a very big deal because when you look at why children die in accidents. And when you talk about the commonest accidents, it's drowning. It's every child should be drown-proofed. And that's just a matter of they get their lessons and then you just got to put your time in the water. So nothing beats a Florida, warm, heated swimming pool in February. Nothing beats that for kids learning. So all the grandkids, yours number 7 and 8, all the grandkids have been waterproofed.
They're now at a level of swimming where they are very likely to drown, but they have too much confidence.
They sure do.
Because they can kind of float now and they can kind of pedal themselves along. And so I think they have bad judgment. So getting that deep exposure.
Oh yeah, I mean, they'll be diving, right? We'll throw rings and they have to dive for them. And it's really, all the grandkids have been through it. It's very important.
And then we should probably next summer start thinking about whether or not we're gonna do those big ponds on Indian Camp.
We're gonna do it.
Yeah,
it's just when.
It's just when. We're thinking about big swimming ponds, like 25 yards.
Yeah, and sort of 14, 15 feet deep. I mean, it's a really nice valley.
Yeah.
But boy, ponds are a commitment. Ponds are not trivial.
Building it, maintaining it.
Oh yeah, no, they're living things.
Yeah. And it's all the wildlife that try and get in there. At least my birds won't be there.
No, but the bears will be there and the foxes. Everybody will be there.
Yeah, it's gonna be really nice.
It is. I like it, but it's a thing.
It's a thing. Topic for today, and the one that we suggested last time, and then in the comment section you guys said you wanted to hear about it, are Granddad's rules of parenting. And this has been something that I've heard about ever since I first started dating Mark. I started dating Mark when I was 21 and we didn't have kids until I was 31. So for 10 years, I'd basically been planning out how to raise my own children, a lot of which was based on your rules of parenting.
So I'm a pathologist by instinct and by life experience, and pathologists almost by definition classify and grade everything. So naturally, I had 4 kids, which these days is kind of a lot. And we were in this small northern New England town, and I was not in sync with the town culture on raising children. I'm an English colonial. We had very clear cultural rules about children. Like, I'll give you an example. Children should be seen and not heard. And these children would walk into an adult conversation and interrupt. And I would go, why are you speaking? And I'd look around and all the other adults would, oh, what is it, honey? What's wrong with you? That child's now going to think that they're the center of attention and they'll feel that the world, wow, that's just wrong. So I was always out.
Yours is an older school method perspective in the sense of you have a lot of new parents that are really struggling with their kids. And this is why I wanted to talk about it on the podcast. And they're using all of these, every feeling counts, and any emotion that your kid is going through, all of it needs to be validated. No matter what's going on, you give them your time. All that in theory sounds really kind. In my experience, it has not worked on my kids at all. And
well, how do they behave when they come and stay with me?
Perfectly.
And when you get them back, are they better kids?
Yeah.
Yeah, for a while, till they fall into the new parent system.
One of our daughters, she's 5, a lot of tears, which 5-year-olds do. And we've tried different, your kids never.
No, not kids never.
And we've tried different techniques, and some of them, like, sometimes we get frustrated and sometimes we're like, oh, buddy. And I think there was one day, it was like 1 or 2 weeks ago, where Mark and I spent a full 24 hours being like, sweetheart, oh, buddy, I know feelings are big. And it was more, we were kind of doing it experimentally because we wanted to see, we'd never really leaned into that method.
Yeah.
And we were coddling her and we were holding her. That's got to be really hard and validating. And she did not stop for 2 days.
Well, because you rewarded her.
Yes.
Yes.
Until Finally, Mark said, enough.
Yeah.
Enough. Lydia.
Yeah. You took it 2 days
have
longer
to
than I
stop.
would. Yes.
It maybe was 5 minutes of her like arguing with him, and then that was it.
Yes. And it all stopped, right?
And then it stopped.
Yes.
Frig.
You wanted to strangle her.
Because as a emotional female,
Yeah. As an emotional person.
as an emotional person, when I'm feeling emotional, I want my feelings to be validated in that moment. And so I kind of was hoping.
Sort of married
that it
into the
would
wrong
work.
family for that, didn't
Oh
you?
boy, did I ever. If I remember correctly, there are 4 rules.
Yes, yes. Well, first let's set the stage.
Okay.
Okay. So remember, everyone thinks they're an expert on child raising. Everyone's got an opinion. You might have had no children and build ditches, and you've got an opinion on raising children.
Yeah.
So I get it. I've been yelled at by way more people than you're going to yell at me at. I grew up in this northern New England town where I was massively an outlier amongst dozens and dozens of people, every one of whom felt it was their responsibility to lecture me on how badly I was raising my children. So you go right ahead, water off a duck's back. Yeah. You aren't even in the running for
Give us your worst comments.
Give it your worst comments. I'm unimpressed. It's the old nature-nurture argument. And everyone can argue what it is, but let me promise you with children, it's for sure 2/3 just your family genetics. So if you want really good children, marry a really good spouse. If you didn't do that, you're just like, I'll never run fast. I should have married, I should have had someone who ran fast if I wanted to have fast kids. How you marry and your pedigree, I can't fix that. And let me remind you, this is very clear from identical twin studies. Your child reflects your socioeconomic status till puberty, and then they flip to their biology. So when you say, how much of a difference do I make? Yeah, not much. So make it count, but don't kid yourself. Yeah. Who you married is most of what's going to happen here. So if you make this much difference, what you got to ask yourself is this. What is the difference I'm going to do? And wait for it. This is what helped me the most amongst the whole town criticizing me at least once a week. What do I want my kid to be when they're 25? Now, I didn't pick 25 arbitrarily. You can pick 26 or 27 if you want. I had 4 boys. I got to tell you, males are boys until something happens between 25 and 30 and they become men. So, and I don't know a lot about girls, but my bet is it works. Mm-hmm. Girls maybe start sooner, yeah. But nonetheless, the rules are still the same. If you can get that kid to 25 without a pregnancy or a felony charge, call that a success.
What do you mean by pregnancy?
Right. Out of wedlock. If you're 25 and single with a baby, man, you just gave yourself an uphill life. I can't fix that. If you've got a baby, babies have priority. So it's not about you anymore. Mm-hmm. That really matters. Mm-hmm. And having a felony charge, yes, so you did something really wrong. It's one thing to smoke a little weed. Yeah, don't go push heroin. I mean, that's really different. Yeah. But something magical happens in the mid-20s. Your children become adults. All that energy just settles down. They start being responsible. They don't feel the need to speed at night drunk. It's just better. Through all this, keep your eye on mid-20s with a clean sheet.
Now, what happens as a parent at that stage? You're not saying I'm off the hook.
No, you're never off the hook.
You're never off the hook. And if your kid ends up with a felony or an unplanned pregnancy, it just means like it's going to be
dug a hole.
Yeah.
I've felt that in America, short of those 2 things, criminal activity and you have a child, short of that, everyone should get their entire record scrubbed when they're 25 and they should start again. I think that would be perfectly fair in our culture because you won't believe how good they are. So all the while I was having criticism, what I would say to myself is, how will this help them when they're 25? So one of the commonest comments I got was, you're way too hard on your kids. I'd look at them and say, these are lard-ass American doctors' kids. What do you think the biggest risk is when they're 25? That I was too hard on them or I was too easy on them? And these people would go, yeah, well, there's that. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Okay, so everyone's an expert, everyone's got an opinion. That's stipulated, and no one agrees with me. So that's stipulated and all this. So yell away, stand in line. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. So how did your kids turn out? Because one of the things about a small town is it's a vertical experiment, meaning you're not studying 1,000 kids across 5 years. You're studying 100 kids across their whole lives. Our kids went to elementary together and they graduated high school together. So I got to see how your kids turned out. So whenever someone has an opinion on kids, you always say, tell me about your kids. And then measure that against what your goals were. Mine are simple, right? No felony charge, no baby. I'm just calling that good. And after that, it's your pedigree. So marry well. You should ask, well, how did your 4 boys turn out? And then how did that compare to what you wanted them to be? So I had 2 rules for this little bit of difference I was going to make. I had 2 aspirations for my parenting. The first one was the kid would be 25 and would say, I alone am responsible for my own happiness. The kid had to believe that. Yeah. And the second one was for people like us, and we're sort of bright enough people with means. For us, we underachieve or fail mostly because we're afraid to fail. So the question was, how do you teach a kid not to be afraid of failure?
Oof.
Right? Because it holds so many of us back.
It does. I didn't even understand those concepts until I met your family. And those didn't really sink in until the last few years, and I still struggle with them.
Oh, they're horrible. Yeah. So then the question becomes, how do you teach someone that you alone are responsible for your own happiness? And these are the 2 dreadful rules I came up with. And you just ask any of my kids, they just grimace. The first is this: when are you allowed to have self-pity? And the answer?
Never!
Never. Never.
Wait.
Never.
Okay, if I may interrupt, as a Jewish female, and I'm saying
Why did you
female
lower
and
your
I'm
voice?
saying Jewish,
Yeah.
and I'm saying those things and I mean them.
Yeah.
I mean, like, we relate to each other by kvetching.
Yeah.
So we live.
You understand why everyone criticizes me? I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, stop whining.
Yeah. And now that I've been out of that culture for so long, when I see it in my own children, I'm just like, oh.
Well, it's in all of us.
It is in all of us.
Poor me. What's more emotionally gratifying and destructive as poor little me?
And that makes me realize because they're doing it means I'm still doing it.
Of course.
And I can watch them do it and say, I find that really unattractive.
And remember, we're back to the hardship versus suffering argument, right? If they're suffering, you have all the TLC in the world. If it's hardship, hey, good for you. Good practice.
Toughen up.
Toughen up. Life hurts. So the first thing about how do you say I alone am responsible is, when are you allowed to whine? When are you allowed self-pity?
Never.
Okay. The second one is, when are you allowed to lose your sense of humor?
Never.
Never. Ever. Okay, but remember.
Wait, suffering and hardship.
Yeah, suffering's different. You got to pay attention to that. Yeah. That's why there's judgment.
Yeah.
That's why strangers can't look after your kids. You have to know when your kid is suffering or hardship. That's the hard part of parenting. Yeah. Don't confuse being funny with having a sense of humor. They're different. It's not a sense of humor till you laugh when you slip on the ice.
Yeah.
That really.
Can you laugh at yourself?
Oh God, my kids hate this. They're quite humorless people.
Who likes it? No, you know what? When you have a sense of humor, you like it.
You do sort of go, well, that hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you're teaching it, yeah, well, remember when we go through the rules, that's a hard one to teach. So how then do you teach not to be afraid of failure? I thought about that for a long time, and you know what I finally concluded? I had to teach by showing the kids my failures, which meant I had to be open and honest about my failures. And so I used what I called the mountain bike metaphor. So I used to be a really serious mountain biker. And when you mountain bike, you fall. And when you stop and go over your handlebars, the commonest fall you do, it's called doing an endo. And so I biked with these really great guys. We were all similar people. And we're biking in our local little mountain. And our rule was, if you're going to endo, you had to shout so that everyone could stop and enjoy your fall. Because you were next. There's something really gratifying. Ooh, right? Oh, that tree didn't even bend a bit, you know? There's something about it. So I had to share that. So I'm moving from practice. I shared all my failures in practice. It's really hard to do. And for the kids, they didn't enjoy it, right? You want to sort of think, oh, well, everything goes perfectly for the sun god. Yeah, it doesn't.
Well, especially in your line of work.
Oh.
You miss something on a slide.
All the time.
Yeah.
The human eye has a 10% failure rate,
no
matter who you are. Errors are baked into the pie. So for example, I would sign out 5,000 biopsies a year. That's pretty standard for a good working pathologist. You have an error rate of about 1 in 10,000. So every second year, I would miss a diagnosis that would cause someone harm. And I was in practice for 40 years. And I can tell you, every one of those people that got hurt because I failed in perfection. So I shared failure a lot with them. My favorite one though, just to illustrate the story. So I've been practicing for all these decades. Finally, it all wraps up because your mother-in-law gets sick. And I'm teaching, right? And it was great. I was in the Caribbean, loved the students. We had a great time. And I come back and this international teaching company asked me to come and do their pathology for them. Well, I can teach. I've been doing it for 3 years. It was a love fest, so what the heck? And I go into the lecture and they're not expecting me, they're expecting someone else who was well-known, and they come for this well-known lecture. A third of them get up and walk out of the room. That's a tough start, hey?
Yeah, that's a
And
tough
so
start.
I'm lecturing, the way I do. And at the end of the first hour, we take our break. And as I come back in, a kid has his back to me and doesn't realize I'm behind him. He goes, "Yeah, I'll give the jerk another hour."
Oh boy.
Well, okay, so but as a parenting moment, what did I do that night? I sent an email to all the boys and I titled it, "Dad Plows Out in Dallas." And my oldest son, within an hour, this is how he responded. He sent me a picture of a used fishing boat in the big town right by me. He goes, "This will be way better for me."
Quit.
Yeah, screw it. So you plowed out.
Yeah.
So let's go to a really practical moment in this, because I teach medical students for their step 1 exam. It's existential. If you fail that, I can't help you.
And sorry, step 1, step 2, those are to graduate
Medical
med school?
schools. Medical school, coming out of med school to get a residency. You can't practice medicine without a license.
Yep.
You can't get a license without a residency. And you can't get a residency if you don't pass step 1 and step 2. You're $150,000 in debt. You've been at med school for 2 years, and you're facing an exam that if you fail, you're done. So I have to teach kids about failure. And no one talks about failure. Right here I am talking about how to teach failure. Teaching failure is really painful to do. I really have not enjoyed it, but there it is.
Yeah.
You got to decide, do you like your ego better or your kid better? So we've stipulated my categories as a parent. You alone are responsible for your own happiness, right? And don't fear failure.
Yep.
Fear not trying. That was my unique parenting.
Yep.
So let's now go to the rules of parenting.
Yeah.
Though having those stipulations, and yes, you're going to criticize me, stand in line.
Yeah.
Okay. These are 4 rules, and they're hierarchical, which means you don't get to rule number 2 until you've done rule number 1.
Yep.
Right? So rule number 1, look at me. There's no such thing as time that's quality. No, it's just time. I've spent more hours on sodden soccer field watching poor soccer played by talentless 9-year-olds than anyone else in this world, because I had 4 boys, right? Nothing compares swimming, where you get to go sit in an 88-degree humid environment to watch your kid go this. Badly. Congratulations, you were 33rd out of 88. Nice job. And then just as a special punishment, at the end of each swim season, every one of those wretched 90 children gets every one of their time at the start of the season and at the end of the season showing how much they improved. So like they swim 4 or 5 events for 90 children, and their free went from 23 seconds to 19. There's no such thing as quality time. There's only time.
And you call it "look at me."
Yes, because the kid that's all
the kid just wants to look at you and see
the
that
kid
you're there.
The kids only wanted my most valuable thing, which was
Your time.
time. Do you think I could give $20 for someone to go look at them?
No.
I would have done that in a heartbeat.
Oh my gosh. Ever since the twins were born, for the most part, I've been home with them. We've thrown them into school here and there. Now they're in kindergarten, but I'm always the one that picks up. I'm the one that drops off. Mark's been really very busy doing
Division of labor.
Yep, division of labor, absolutely. So they get a lot of time with me. We work really hard to give them as much time as they can with Dad. But let me tell you, when he comes home, all they want to do, they just want to talk to him. They just want They want him to look at.
Watch what I'm doing.
Mark and I always give each other this look because it's always like data, data, data. Data.
That's right.
And it's honestly, it's not just them, it's me too. All
Yes.
3 of us are like,
Yes.
okay, I'm like,
Of
Mark,
course.
okay, but you want to hear, okay, but, and then it's just the 3 of us yapping at him.
Yes, that's right.
We all want him to look at us.
Yes. And so when they come over for the sleepovers, what do you think I give them?
You.
My undivided attention. And I create intense games where I'm watching them and commenting.
Yep.
And you know how you know a child is ready to be an adult? They don't need you anymore. Oh, I got to tell you, it's the worst feeling in the world, having gone from the most important person in the world, look at me, suddenly don't need you anymore. No, that is success, Sally. I coached every team, right? You could see the kids whose parents went through divorce. They went from these slashing, independent, thanks to the advice coach, to gravitating to you, standing by you, looking up at you. You could feel the need in them.
Yeah.
The most valuable thing in the world is the only thing they want.
Your time.
Look at me. God, it's awful. And as that very witty comedian says, my children are really boring. I literally know everything they know.
She's very funny. I forget her name, but...
Yeah, and so you just stare at them and you go, but don't look away and put down your bloody phone. Sitting there on your phone is not
the same
undivided
thing.
attention.
No, it's not
just
the
learn to be bored.
Yeah.
They're really boring. So thank God I like teaching. The boredom is less for me than most.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Yeah.
But they grow out of it.
I didn't know what to think of kids before I had them. And that's why I think it's very funny that people without kids have opinions about kids.
Oh my goodness.
But I have to say, it is the biggest joy and the biggest heartbreak. And I'm amazed at how much I can't stop thinking about them, and also how monotonous it is.
Correct.
It's like, it's everything. It's so all encompassing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so rule number 1, look at me.
Yeah.
No such thing as quality time, only time.
Yeah.
Put down your phone.
Yeah.
Number 2, I'm not asking you to do anything I don't do. I get up every morning, I shower and shave, I put on my shirt, and I leave to go do my job really well, and I come home tired because I've been doing that. And you're complaining about getting up and going to school? I'm not asking you to do anything I don't do. Yeah, so that's the worst ever. You set the example. Just great. Don't want them to smoke? Guess who has to quit smoking?
For me, the biggest challenge there is that we're trying to get our twins to stop crying out over everything. Everything.
Yep, they don't cry for me. But that's because of rule number 3.
Yeah, which we'll get to. But then I look at myself, I cry over everything. I'm hormonal, I'm anxious, I'm this, I'm that. I've been working really hard at not doing that because I have to change for them to change. They're just going to keep
Let's
mimicking
just stop
me.
and talk about tears for a sec. Tears are not relevant. You can cry all you want. There can't be any self-pity.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I'm talking about the self-pitying tears.
Yeah, you're talking about the self-pitying tears.
Yeah.
It's not the tears.
No.
If you see something wonderful, you can't control the tears because we're programmed for an emotional expression of tears.
Yeah.
Tears are neither here nor there.
And we're creating an exception for suffering.
Right. When is self-pity allowed?
Never.
Right. If those are tears of, oh, I'm so sad, poor me. Yeah, very unattractive. So it's not tears.
But it's a category of tears.
Right.
Yeah.
All tears mean is emotion. Expressing emotion is something you don't really control very well. So if you are emotional and tears come, then don't hide them.
Yeah.
Just let them run down your cheeks.
Yeah.
People go, oh, they're feeling emotional.
I've taken that
Yes,
into my own life.
of course.
You can do a lot when you're crying.
You can.
Yeah.
It's just emotion.
It's just emotion.
Don't let it be self-pity.
Yes.
Yeah, it has to cry. I mean, crying's neither here nor there. Okay, so look at me. I'm not asking you to do anything I don't do. Those are self-evident, and we all get it. Now we're starting to get to the harder rules. Rule number 3, the power of expectations. As the Marines say, show me a man who thinks he's a loser. Show me a man who thinks he's a winner. They're both right. That's the challenge, is what is a reasonable expectation?
Yeah.
And the answer is you're the parent.
Yeah.
Well, what gives you the right? Yeah, rules number 1 and 2. Because I sat there on that frozen field in November, getting colder and colder, watching you lose some random soccer game to a town I could barely find. That's why. Because I'm your mother. Yeah. I've earned the right.
Yeah.
And the power of expectation, I can't tell you how important it is. So when we say, why do the girls come over and not cry around me? Because it's not on the list of choices with me. How do they know that? Because they're cunning little creatures. Yeah. They read you perfectly.
Yeah.
So, for my kids, they'd come home from class in math, and I'd go, but this is a B+. They'd go, yeah. I go, so you didn't understand the material? No, I understood it. So no one else in the class got an A. No, there were several A's. So you just didn't try hard enough. But you're there, right? So why don't you, as long as you're there, why don't you just work harder and get the A? That's a measure that you're putting out. But a B+ is good enough. Yeah, I see, you don't get to set the standard. So it's a common problem I see parents negotiating. No, you don't negotiate. You're the parent.
Yeah.
And we come back to, what do you want them to be when they're 25?
You wouldn't have set that expectation if you didn't actually believe they were capable of it.
Oh, I didn't expect them to dunk a basketball.
Right.
Right? They would jump about this high.
Right.
The expectation is so critical to performance. Who sets that?
You have to.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the context of having watched that kid for hours and hours at a time,
Yeah.
and having gotten up every day, and you've done the work, you've come home, you keep fitness, you are polite, you get to set it.
It's hard not to tie up your own identity of who you want to be, or who you wished you were, or how you wish you were treated in your kid.
Most of us have children as mini-me's. And I got to tell you, I never did. For me, it was much more about balancing karma. I had these lovely generations that gave up a lot of their happiness, put the time and energy and money into me. I'm just passing that forward.
You're talking about your mom, your
my
aunts,
grandparents,
your
my uncles, my
yeah.
aunts. I grew up in a whole culture that really sacrificed a lot for their kids. My father he got Saturday to hike. You know, he wouldn't have even worked without us. They gave up a lot for us. I can never repay them. All I can do is do the same for the next group, which means, what do you want for your kids? If you want them to be mini-me's, well, okay, that you get to choose. You set the standards. What was mine? You alone are there for your own happiness, and don't fear failure. So if they did that, that's all they owed me. You know, why did you have children? Boy, mini-me's, that's tough because the kid's probably not you.
Well, you can look at my upbringing.
Very much so.
I had two parents who were very different from one another, but each tried to turn me into a mini-me. I was really neither.
No, that's right. Turns out you like goats.
Yeah. I was not your sort of medically minded, going to be a doctor. My mom was an actress, grew up poor, so she wanted this big life. I just wasn't really either.
No, none of that made you happy.
Yeah. Their expectations were that I would want the big life like my mom did, and I would want to go into a professional doctor, lawyer career like my dad.
Yeah, you notice how many of my sons are doctors? 0.
Yeah.
And do I care? No. If that was, I mean, it would have been great if they'd liked it.
Yeah.
I'm hoping maybe one of the granddaughters will. That would be great.
That'd be fun.
But if they don't, what are my expectations?
Don't fear failure.
Right. And you alone are responsible. No whining. Can't lose your sense of humor. So rule number 3 now is starting to have it's harder because it requires judgment. This is what I expect of you. And I expect that because what is your goal?
What is your goal? And also I've watched you and can observe, and I've created this expectation for you. I see what your potential is.
And no one knows better than you.
Yeah.
So that's rule number 3, power of expectation. Then we come to the really hard rule, which is rule number 4. Rule number 4 says, failure is the teacher, pain is the motivator. And you can just take your hand and go in and fix it for the kid. Yeah, you can't. If you're going to have a child who's resilient, the ability to take really severe problems and bounce back. If you want resiliency, it comes from failure that you've overcome, which is this all back to the discussion of hardship and suffering.
Yeah.
And pain is a critical part of failure. If it didn't truly hurt, it wasn't much of a failure. And when you're lying on the ground bleeding from your failure, and it hurts and you're embarrassed and everything's gone, what do? Which of the greatest stories do we see come out of the bitterest of defeats? Almost all our great stories are that. There's lucky people that all that just are magic. Good for them. People win the lottery. Yeah, not you, right? All through that child's raising, you've got to make a risk calculation. And my wife and I had our fiercest fights, and they were almost dragging me to knock them out, was that I had what I called the calculated risk. Yes, the risk of failure is real and harmful, but not deadly. So I'll let the kid take the risk.
Where she really didn't want to keep them safe. Yeah.
No risk is the biggest risk of all.
Yeah.
So how do you do a series of risks? So I had the girls this weekend, and we had these big cut rounds of logs that because I was chainsawing, and we started lily padding jumping them. Well, are they going to fail?
Yeah.
Well, it's not much of a game if they don't.
Yeah.
Now they're falling on the hard edge of like cherry wood. It's going to really hurt. So should you not play the game? Or is that failure really important part of the game?
Yeah.
Yeah, go take a look at their legs. They really hurt.
That's what Charlie was complaining. She said, my leg hurts right back here. She probably landed right there.
Drilled it. And all I can say is, that looks like it hurt. Tears? Yeah, I mean, because emotion brings tears, but no self-pity, right? That's the old football expression, rub a little dirt in it, you're fine. But that includes emotional. That includes intellectual.
You see it in your two, well, all your boys, really. But the two youngest, my husband and his youngest brother, both became entrepreneurs. Mark went through a whole 10-year career working for the man. And he just said, no, I need to take this risk. When we quit our lives from professionals in Canada with 2 incomes.
An assured life.
To really nothing, so that we could go on an adventure and go down to Florida and see if Mark can make his businesses work while I be a caretaker. But without your influence, there's no way we would have done it. Just encouraging us to do
take the chance.
Yeah.
No, don't fear failure.
Yeah, and it wasn't a hey, they seem really happy with what they're doing, and I'm gonna rock the boat and insist that no, you were watching us and you heard us.
Yeah. Rule number 3, power of expectation.
Yeah.
From where you started, it wasn't very impressive, and it was true because you weren't really happy, Right,
No,
right.
and
Mark needs to be in charge.
Canada's like that though.
Very much
You
so.
can do
It's safe.
It's safe. It's perfectly great.
Yep.
But it's not like impressive.
Again, it's not about who you're trying to impress. It wasn't right for you.
No, it wasn't right.
No, the point is you weren't happy.
No.
It was other people's success.
Yes.
Well, only someone really caring about your outcome, which should be your parent, can say to you, so are you enjoying this? Because obviously everyone's clapping their hands and you're winning awards, and yet it kind of looks like you're drinking to me. And so that's what the power of expectation is. And my expectation was, don't fear failure, and you're responsible.
Yeah.
Not other people, and not their expectations. It's who do you trust for these expectations?
Yeah.
That's a good parent or a good coach. So failure is the teacher, pain is the motivator.
Yeah.
I mean, so when you guys were down and COVID hit and you went broke, did I think that was the funniest thing I'd ever heard?
There's no work. There's no money
Right.
coming in. Freight is off the charts.
What you thought was going to happen didn't happen.
Right.
So what did you do?
Mark got a remote.
Mark got a job as a bicycle repairman.
Right.
Did he know how to fix bicycles?
No.
No, that's
He
right.
taught himself.
He taught himself.
Mark being Mark was dissatisfied with just a $25 an hour or whatever job. Not because of the money. It was because it wasn't that interesting.
It wasn't interesting.
Now that he knew all about electric bikes, he started finding these secondhand bikes on Facebook Marketplace, and he could tune them up and then he'd sell them.
Yes. So he learned arbitrage.
It covered our lives.
It covered your lives.
Yeah.
And what did he learn from that? He'll tell you. I learned to sell. I learned to look at value and to see values that others didn't. He always said that in the bike shop that he was running, he always said, if I'd had an e-bike in pastel, I could have sold 4 times more bikes because people come to Florida, they expect a tropical colored bike. He said, I learned to sell, and now he's building a business building on selling.
On sale.
He would never have done that if he hadn't taken, what was that, a year of being a bicycle repairman. So was that failure? Or was failure the teacher?
The failure of our wall printing business coming to a standstill
Yes.
because of COVID, and
Yes.
because it wasn't just COVID. There was also
Yep.
it's our fault too,
Yeah.
right? He wouldn't be the sales guy he is now.
Think how much he learned from that.
Yeah.
Failure is the teacher, pain is the motivator.
Yeah.
That's a good example of that. And I'm watching the other boys go through it. You know, the money right now is the measure of, did you prove you had a good idea? And none of them are particularly well off. If they'd stayed the course of where they were, they would have been conventionally upper middle class and successful and not as happy as they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are the 4 rules, and it's not beanbag, right? They become progressively harder. The first one's just boring, look at me. The second one is, now you have to lose weight, and you don't get to eat that chocolate eclair. So it's unpleasant, but then we come to the power of expectation, and now it's really judgment. Am I being realistic? The kid has failed 3 times. Have they tried hard enough? Or am I just setting a lower bar? Only you can do that. That's really hard. And then watching your kid fail. Oh God, that's I just can't tell you, it just eats you alive. And that's where having a spouse really matters, because you really do reassure each other on that. Okay, so is there hope in this? Because right now it's pretty hopeless, right?
It sounds like the worst.
It's the worst.
You're like, maybe I'm on the fence about having kids. Oh, I'm not.
I
gonna
get
have
it.
kids
Oh, I
anymore.
totally understand. That's a reasonable thought. If you get all those right, and we're not talking about sick kids or kids with problems, we're just talking about normal lard-ass
Standard,
standard government issue kids.
Yeah.
What happens is when they get to be 25, and you've really done this all, you know, you're wrinkled, bald, and unhappy, but they absolutely have the chance to leap from all 4 of those rules. I'm not kidding. This is the magic, and find purpose. So there is hope.
Yeah.
They go from being you'd better do it because you'll fail and it'll hurt, to being you should do it because it expresses you. It's who you are. It doesn't even matter if it pays. You have purpose. That's why we have ministers. There's lots of jobs where people find purpose and they get paid dirt. It's not about that, right?
Yeah.
And so as I watch you and Mark, you found purpose. I mean, it's really uplifting. You take a look at the boys in business. They get up every day and they're excited.
Yeah.
4 rules. Look at me. Not asking you to do anything I don't do. Judgment is very painful. You really have to be honest with yourself. And then the pure hell of failure and pain. But if it all works out, at 25, you see this adult that you really enjoy who finds a purpose.
I've now found purpose through the influence of Mark and you.
Yeah.
At 37.
Yeah.
Right.
It arrives when it arrives.
It arrives when it arrives. And I'll just share this tidbit. I'm probably going to start crying when I say it. Like, I've always really loved animals. Rescues have kind of fallen into our lap. I've been doing this whole project of like helping with dogs and cats in our neighborhood. My accounts are growing to the point where I'm probably getting message at least once a day saying, I know you're far away and can't really help, but can you give advice? Or someone locally, can you take this dog? Or someone saying, I understand maybe you can't take this dog, but maybe you can help me find this dog a new home. And we had one of those latter situations with this dog Herschel, which I posted a short about. And Herschel is this 11-year-old, really old, very sweet boxer mix who this 27-year-old gal and her boyfriend have had for 3 years. They adopted this senior dog thinking they want to do some good. And he has the worst case of separation anxiety I've ever seen. And it's to the point where he self-harms, so he bites his lips until they bleed. She said it causes him so much stress that I basically just don't leave him. I hire someone to come stay with him when I have to grocery shop. Countless amounts of money on vets and behavioral specialists and medication. They've been working really hard with this dog. And they normally would just say, hey, he's old, we're just gonna let him live out his last couple of years with us. But the problem is, because of Hurricane Helene, they have to move. Yeah. She lost all of her clients. There's an opportunity in Nashville for them, but it's in an apartment.
Yep, no dogs. At least not that dog.
Not that dog. They've talked to the vet and they talked to everyone, and there is an option to do what's called a behavioral euthanasia. If no one's going to adopt him and you're kind of at your wit's end and he's really old and he's lived a really good life, this is your option. And so I'm like, oh, I gotta help this dog. I couldn't bring him in. He's scared of other dogs, so that's not going to work. And so I did a post on him, and I got a message on YouTube, or a comment, and he said, please get me in touch with the owner. I would love to take him. And so I put them in touch, and I reached out to his current owner last night. I said, hey, how'd the conversation go? Well, it's kind of heavy. So this guy is like 40s or 50s. He lives not that far away, stage 4 cancer. He was diagnosed 1.5 years ago, and he was told he had months to live. He lives off grid, and he was a goat herder. He's like, I have to rehome all my animals, and I will just live out my last few months by myself. He stopped the treatment because it's not really doing anything. But he saw this post. Sorry. And he said, I would really like to take Herschel, and we could like live out our last few years together, or months, or however long they have. And when I was reading the messages she was sending, I just started weeping like this.
Yes.
And I wept and I wept. And Mark said, if you feel this much, you need to do more of this.
Yes.
This is a purpose.
Yeah, so this is a good example, and started to be clinical, okay. But this is a good example of tears not being self-pity. So the Greeks have a term for this. It's the difference between pathos and bathos. So pathos is genuine emotion of connection. And you know, we're all going to die, and he's run out of his time. And the fact that he wants to share it with someone who's basically can't be tolerated by anyone else, that's pathos of our condition. Yeah. You know, if you're not moved by that, go get a heart transplant. I mean, that's a nice story, right? That's not bathos. Oh, look, the cookies are soggy. Okay, just didn't need that. Yeah. So yeah, those aren't tears you should ever be afraid of. You should let people see them. People appreciate that, you know? I mean, we're looking in a world where authenticity is becoming more and more valuable. And this is a touching and affecting story. And you know, I'm sorry to be clinical about it, but I sort of am the doctor of death, so
we need both in this podcast.
Yeah, sorry, I have a very unique role. But I think that's a really good example of some of the good we're seeing in social media, which is asking for help.
Yeah.
You know, and so when you're saying asking for advice, I can promise you, I give advice a lot. I mean, I've had thousands of medical students, and I almost consistently will tell you what my advice is. Well, here's a mirror. Why don't you explain it to the mirror?
Yeah. Oof. Yeah.
But what I am is an honest broker. I'll go, gee, do you really mean that? Because I haven't seen you get out for a walk every morning. Bringing honesty while you look in the mirror. And so for you, this affects you. This touches you.
By 25, if you've done this all and you've done the work, your kid will have purpose.
Well, the kid will know to look for purpose.
Or to know to look for it. I didn't really have a parent doing that for me. I had a father-in-law doing that for me. Mark's been a huge support.
Well, he grew up in the system.
He grew up in the systems. I was telling you the other day, I said, I don't know anyone who's worked harder on anything as Mark has worked on me. He's really helped me with everything I go through.
In all fairness, he's just paying it forward.
He is paying it forward. You've watched me now with dogs that eat my chickens, with dogs that misbehave, dogs we can't find homes for. Yeah. Last night, it kind of like the light bulb clicked of this really is a purpose.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so happy to be part of your project. It's really fun to watch. The whole purpose of this filming is so that other people can share it and then go home and say, I want to feel like that.
Yeah. I've always enjoyed marketing and social media. So recent growth on my platforms was like, oh, this is kind of cool.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, other people seem to be interested in me running with goats or whatever it is. But I'm like, holy crap, my platform can actually do some good.
And it's what you want to do.
Yeah, it is.
It is. And so, again, everyone out there watching, go look in the mirror and say, do I spring out of bed in the morning? Am I living what I want to do, or am I living someone else's expectation? And you go, yes, but I have all this money I need. And I guess I'd go say, it's not what something costs in money, it's what it costs out of your time in life. Because at some point, we're all going to have our stage 4 cancer. You've had the courage to be honest about what it is you want to do. And it hasn't all been praised by everyone around you.
No.
Right.
I've gotten a lot of questioning of like, are you sure that makes you happy?
Oof, really? Yeah.
It sounds kind of remote and
hard.
It's
and
not what I would have had
right.
picked for you and all that kind of stuff.
So what's the most important virtue? Courage. Because if you don't have courage, none of the other virtues matter. No. So if there's anything I would argue Granddad brings to the discussion, it's be brave. Yeah. Go look in the mirror, be honest. And when you're honest about it, be brave. And when you're ending out over your bike, what do you have to do?
You have to yell.
You have to yell so we all get to enjoy it.
That's right.
Don't fear failure.
Well, I think we've already decided on our next topic.
Ooh, have we?
Marriage.
Oh, yes, of course, because I'm as expert on marriage as I am on children.
How long were you married before?
43 years.
43 years. If Holly hadn't passed from her ailment, it would have just kept going.
Oh, God, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that was the one.
I think that's going to be a really interesting topic. We're going to be doing that one remotely, so on Riverside. So that'll be interesting.
Why not? What the heck?
Why not? If you are interested in anything we talked about today, if you want to support our rescue efforts, if you like running goats, want to hear more about kids or marriage or...
Yeah. Whatever interests you. Right?
Whatever interests you. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Yeah.
See you next time.
See you next time.